The portal deposited Rose on one of Atherin's designated arrival platforms. Her first breath of the realm's air carried the scent of both flowering blooms and ash, a jarring combination that seemed to define this place. Rose stepped into the twilight realm of Atherin, the weight of her 102 years bearing down on her. The flame heart crystal's absence was a constant reminder of the sacrifices she'd made to get here. As she made her way through the contrasting landscape of lush forests and blackened wastelands, she couldn't shake the feeling that the dark energies permeating the realm were not just familiar, but connected to a power she knew all too well. Whispers of Ultranacious Eternus reached her ears, tales of a ruler who commanded the realm's dark forces with terrifying ease, whose empire had grown to cast a long shadow across the lands. Rose's suspicions deepened with every overheard conversation. When she finally laid eyes on Ultranacious Eternus, her fears were confirmed. Even from a distance, she recognized Kaelion, the man who had once betrayed her. But gone was the order lackey she had outplayed years ago. In his place stood a being of immense power, one who had clearly spent the decades since their last encounter amassing dark knowledge and influence. Rose understood the implications immediately. Kaelion, now Ultranacious Eternus, wasn't just another challenge to overcome. He was a major player, perhaps the most significant threat she had ever faced. His empire in Atherin was no mere backwater. It was a seat of power, one that could potentially rival anything she had encountered before. Yet Rose did not despair. Her long life had taught her resilience and resourcefulness. She may have left the flame heart crystal behind, but she still had her razor-sharp mind, her mastery of fire, and the skills she'd honed through decades of maneuvering in Concordia's political and information circles. But taking on Ultranacious Eternus in Atherin would require more than just cleverness and magic. Rose would need to play a long game, gathering allies and information, leaning on the reputation she'd built as an advisor and power broker. She would need to unravel the secrets of Kaelion's rise, find the cracks in his empire, and exploit them with ruthless precision. All of this she would have to do while staying one step ahead of those hunting her from her past, and without revealing the true extent of her own abilities. It was a daunting task, but Rose had never shied away from a challenge. As she melted into the shadows of Atherin, Rose's resolve hardened. Ultranacious Eternus may be a major power in the present day, but she had not come this far to be cowed by an old foe. She would find a way to outmaneuver him, as she had done before, and when the time was right, she would confront him on her own terms. The game was on, and the stakes could not be higher. In Atherin, under the rule of Ultranacious Eternus, Rose knew she was playing for the fate of realms, and she had every intention of winning. Rose's first days in Atherin were spent in careful observation, gathering what information she could while keeping her own identity hidden. She moved through the twilight realm like a shadow, listening to whispers in darkened corners, piecing together the story of Ultranacious Eternus's rise. What she learned only confirmed her worst fears. Kaelion, in the guise of Ultranacious, had spent the decades since their last encounter delving into forbidden magics and ancient artifacts. He had emerged as a being of immense power, one who commanded not just dark forces, but the very fabric of Atherin itself. His empire was not just a political entity, but a well-oiled machine fueled by dark magic. Those who served him were bound not just by loyalty, but by arcane pacts that granted them a portion of his power in exchange for their unquestioning obedience. Yet even as the scale of the challenge before her became clear, Rose found glimmers of opportunity. Ultranacious rule was absolute, but it was not without its discontents. In the forgotten corners of Atherin, in the shadow markets and back alleys, there were those who chafed under his dark reign. Rose began to make cautious contact with these dissidents, always careful to hide her true identity. She presented herself as a wandering mystic, one with knowledge of ancient magics and a grudge against Ultranacious Empire. Slowly, cautiously, she began to build a network of informants and potential allies. A whispered word here, a subtle display of her own power there. Each interaction was a delicate dance, a test to see who she could trust and who might betray her. As she wove her web of contacts, Rose also began to probe the defences of Ultranacious' stronghold. She knew she couldn't confront him directly, not yet, but she could lay the groundwork, find the weaknesses in his wards and barriers, plan for the day when she would make her move. Weeks turned into months, and the strain began to take its toll. But Rose would not relent. She had come too far, sacrificed too much to falter now. Ultranacious Eternus stood at the pinnacle of his power, but she would find a way to bring him low. Rose moved through the twilight streets of Atherin like a ghost, her dark cloak blending seamlessly with the shadows. The betrayal in Concordia was still fresh in her mind, a raw wound that she refused to let heal. Trust, she had learned once again, was a luxury she could not afford. In this strange new realm, with its dark energies and darker secrets, Rose knew that she could rely on no one but herself. The power structures here were unlike anything she had navigated before. The influence of Ultranacious Eternus, once known as Kaelion, permeated every corner of society. But Rose was no stranger to working alone. Her long life had taught her the value of self-reliance, of keeping her own counsel and her own secrets. And so, even as she gathered information and observed the workings of Ultranacious's empire, she kept herself apart. She took refuge in the forgotten places of Atherin, abandoned warehouses, derelict temples, the haunted ruins that dotted the outskirts of the capital. These became her sanctuaries, the places where she could let down her guard for a few precious moments, where she could plan and prepare without fear of prying eyes. Rose's focus was singular: to understand the nature of Ultranacious's power, to find the cracks in his armor that she could exploit. She watched and listened, piecing together the dark history of his rise, the whispers of forbidden magics and ancient pacts that had propelled him to the pinnacle of Atherin's power structure. But she made no moves to confront him directly, not yet. The wounds of her recent betrayal were still too raw, the memory of Kaelion's treachery still too fresh. She needed time to gather her strength, to build her knowledge of this new realm and its dark ruler. In the meantime, she honed her skills in solitude. The fire magic that coursed through her veins was her one constant, the one thing she could always rely on. In the depths of night, in the hidden places where none could see, she practiced her craft, pushing herself to new levels of mastery. She knew that when the time came to face Ultranacious, she would need every ounce of power and cunning at her disposal. He was not the same man she had once known. The decades had honed him into something far more formidable, far more dangerous. But Rose had been forged in the fires of betrayal and hardship. She had survived the machinations of the Order, the chaos of Eldermire's fall, the treachery of those she had once trusted. She would survive this too. And so she bided her time, a solitary figure moving unseen through the twilight world of Atherin, watching, learning, preparing for the moment when she would finally confront the ghosts of her past. Despite her solitary nature and the wounds of recent betrayals, Rose refused to let her circumstances diminish her standards. She may have been a lone figure navigating the dark streets of Atherin, but she was still the same woman who had built a reputation as a refined and influential advisor in Concordia. Even as she took refuge in abandoned buildings and forgotten ruins, Rose began to transform her surroundings to suit her tastes. With a discerning eye and a few carefully chosen furnishings, she turned a derelict warehouse into a tasteful living space, complete with a comfortable bed, a well-stocked kitchenette, and a small but elegant seating area. Her clothing too underwent a transformation. Though she had arrived in Atherin with little more than the armour on her back, Rose quickly set about acquiring a wardrobe that befit her status. Using the skills she had honed in Concordia's political circles, she negotiated with local merchants and artisans, trading her knowledge and magical services for high-quality garments and accessories. Within a matter of weeks, Rose had re-established herself as a figure of taste and refinement, albeit one who moved in the shadows of Atherin's twilight world. Her appearance and bearing served as a kind of armour, a declaration to the world that she would not be diminished by her circumstances. This commitment to elegance extended to her food and drink as well. Even as she gathered information in Atherin's darkened alleyways and smoky taverns, Rose insisted on the finest vintages and the most exquisite delicacies. Her palate, honed by years of living among Concordia's elite, would not be satisfied with anything less. Yet, for all her refinement, Rose was never snobby or condescending. Her appreciation for the finer things was a personal standard, not a weapon to wield against others. In her interactions with Atherin's citizens, from the lowliest street urchin to the most influential merchant, she maintained a kind of graceful poise, a warmth tempered by caution. This combination of sophistication and approachability served Rose well as she navigated Atherin's complex social landscape. Her reputation as a woman of taste and discernment opened doors that might have otherwise remained closed, while her ability to connect with people from all walks of life provided her with a steady stream of information and insights. All the while, Rose continued her solitary preparations for the inevitable confrontation with Ultranacious Eternus. In the privacy of her elegantly appointed hideaways, she honed her fire magic, studied ancient texts, and mapped out the intricate web of ultranacious power. She knew that when the time came, she would need every advantage she could muster. But she also knew that her greatest strength lay not in her magical prowess or her political acumen, but in her unshakable sense of self. No matter what challenges Atherin threw at her, no matter what ghosts from her past resurfaced to haunt her, Rose would remain true to who she was, a woman of refinement, resilience, and indomitable will. And it was with this quiet confidence that she moved forward, a lone flame illuminating her own path through the darkness of Atherin, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead. Rose's investigations into Ultranacious Eternus's past led her deep into the heart of Atherin's oldest libraries and most obscure archives. She pored over dusty tomes and crumbling scrolls, seeking any scrap of information that might shed light on how Kaelion had made the transition from order lackey to ruler of a dark empire. It was in a forgotten corner of a mouldering repository that she finally found the first clue. Hidden among a stack of mundane trade records was a faded document bearing the seal of the Order of the Grey. The document was heavily encoded, but Rose's keen mind and years of experience with the Order's ciphers allowed her to decipher its contents. What she found was a fragmentary account of the chaos that followed Umbral's fall. In the wake of the cataclysm, it seemed, the Order had fractured. Some had perished in the disaster while others had fled, seeking refuge in far-flung realms. But a small faction, led by none other than Kaelion himself, had seen opportunity in the upheaval. They had gathered the Order's most forbidden knowledge, its darkest artifacts, and set out to forge a new power in the ashes of the old. Their journey had been perilous, a harrowing passage through the spaces between realms. Many had been lost along the way, but Kaelion had endured, and when they finally emerged, it was into the twilight lands of Atherin. The document ended there, but it provided Rose with a starting point. She began to search for accounts of Atherin's history, seeking any mention of a dark power rising in the years following Eldermire's collapse. Piece by piece, a picture began to emerge. Kaelion and his followers had arrived in Atherin at a time of great turmoil. The realm had been riven by internal strife, its ancient power structures crumbling. Into this chaos, Kaelion had brought the secrets of the Order, offering power to those who would swear fealty to him. Many had resisted at first, but Kaelion's mastery of dark magic was unmatched. One by one, Atherin's factions had fallen before him, until he stood as the undisputed ruler of the realm. But it was not enough for Kaelion to simply conquer Atherin. He had greater ambitions. Using the forbidden knowledge he had gathered, he had begun to shape himself into something more than human. Through dark rituals and unspeakable sacrifices, he had transformed himself, becoming a being of immense power. He took on a new name, Ultranacious Eternus, and set about reshaping Atherin in his own image. As Rose delved deeper into this dark history, she felt a growing sense of unease. The Kaelion she had known had been dangerous, but this Ultranacious Eternus was something else entirely. A being who had steeped himself in the darkest magics, who had sacrificed his very humanity in pursuit of power. She knew that confronting him would be her greatest challenge yet, but she also knew that she had no choice. Ultranacious Eternus's ambitions would not stop at Atherin. If left unchecked, his darkness would spread, consuming realm after realm until all was under his sway. And so, Rose redoubled her efforts, gathering every scrap of knowledge, every hint of weakness she could find. She would need every advantage, every ally she could muster if she was to stand against the dark titan Ultranacious Eternus had become. But even as the enormity of the task weighed upon her, Rose felt a flicker of something else, a grim determination taking root in her heart. She had been forged in the fires of betrayal and hardship, tempered by decades of survival against impossible odds. If anyone could stand against Ultranacious Eternus, if anyone could bring light to the darkness he had wrought, it was her. Rose, the lone flame, the unbreakable spirit. And she would not rest until Atherin and all the realms were free from his dark reign. Rose sat in her sanctuary, the warm glow of candlelight casting flickering shadows across the walls. Before her lay Master Chen's ledgers, the pages worn and yellowed with age. These were the last gift from her mentor, a lifetime of knowledge and secrets painstakingly recorded. She had read these pages countless times, absorbing the wisdom and insights within. But tonight, she sought a different kind of guidance. Tonight, she grappled with a choice that would define not just her own future, but the fate of realms. Rose's finger traced the lines of Master Chen's neat script, pausing on a passage she had read 100 times before. Power is a heavy burden, my dear student. Those who wield it must also bear the weight of the consequences. Every choice, every action, ripples across the fabric of lives, of worlds. To be a true master is to understand this weight, and to carry it with both strength and compassion. The words seemed to take on new meaning now, as Rose contemplated the terrible decision before her. Seal Atherin, condemning millions to a dark fate under Ultranacious Eternus's rule, or risk billions falling under his sway as his power spread unchecked. Her heart ached at the thought of the lives that would be lost, the suffering that would be endured. Every instinct in her cried out against the idea of willingly causing such harm, even in the name of a greater good. But her mind, honed by decades of hard choices and harsh realities, whispered a different truth. Ultranacious Eternus could not be allowed to extend his reach. The darkness he embodied, the ruin he would bring. It was a threat beyond measure. Rose closed her eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on her like a physical force. In her mind's eye, she saw the faces of those she had sworn to protect. The innocent, the vulnerable, the ones who looked to her as a beacon of hope in a dark world. Could she betray that trust? Could she sacrifice the lives of millions for the sake of billions? Master Chen's words echoed in her thoughts once more. To carry it with both strength and compassion. Compassion, It was the core of who she was, the driving force behind everything she had ever fought for. To turn her back on that now, to make a choice that would cause such profound suffering. Rose's hands clenched, the pages of the ledger crinkling under her fingers. Tears, hot and bitter, stung at the corners of her eyes. But even as her heart broke, her resolve hardened. This was the burden of power, the price of being the one who could make a difference. She had to think beyond her own feelings, beyond the immediate tragedy. She had to think of the realms that would fall if Ultranacious was not stopped. The billions who would suffer under his dark reign. The very fabric of existence that would be warped and twisted by his ambition. Rose drew in a shuddering breath, the decision crystallizing within her like a shard of ice. It was the hardest choice she had ever made, and one she knew would haunt her for the rest of her days. But it was the right choice, the necessary choice. She would seal Atherin. She would bear the weight of the lives lost, carry the guilt and the grief as a reminder of the price of her power. And she would use that power to ensure that no other realm would ever fall to Ultranacious Eternus's darkness. With a heavy heart, but an unbreakable will, Rose began to plan her next move. The path ahead would be dark and painful, steeped in sorrow and sacrifice. But she would walk it, for the sake of the realms, for the sake of all she held dear. As Rose delved deeper into the ancient texts and histories, seeking a way to seal Atherin and contain Ultranacious Eternus, she kept coming across references to a mysterious artifact known as the Key to Atherin. This black orb, said to hold the power to manipulate the boundaries between realms, seemed to be the solution she had been seeking. But locating the key was proving to be a challenge. The texts were frustratingly vague about its whereabouts, offering only cryptic clues and half-forgotten legends. Some claimed it had been hidden deep within the heart of Atherin itself, while others suggested it had been lost eons ago, scattered to the far corners of the realm. Rose knew she would have to be methodical in her search. She began to map out the most likely locations, cross-referencing the hints from the texts with her own knowledge of Atherin's geography and history. She reached out to her network of contacts, calling in favors and gathering what scraps of information she could. It was slow, painstaking work, but Rose was nothing if not determined. She spent long hours in her sanctuary, poring over maps and decoded messages, piecing together the puzzle of the key's location. As she worked, she couldn't shake the sense of urgency that pressed down on her. Every day that passed was another day for Ultranacious Eternus to consolidate his power, to extend his dark reach further across Atherin. She knew she was in a race against time, and the stakes could not be higher. But Rose had not come this far to be thwarted by a lack of information. She redoubled her efforts, pushing herself to the limits of her endurance. She chased down every lead, no matter how tenuous, and slowly, piece by piece, a picture began to emerge. Rose's eyes widened as she read the most recent entries in the hidden archives, her heart pounding with each revelation. The fall of Nythoria and the terrible battle that had followed. They were not distant legends, but events that had taken place a mere 3 years ago. According to the accounts, Ultranacious Eternus had indeed turned his dark gaze upon Nythoria, seeking to corrupt and consume the realm as he had done to so many others. Using the twisted powers he had honed in Atherin, he had begun to spread a darkness across Nythoria, one that threatened to snuff out its light forever. But Nythoria had not fallen easily. The guardians of the realms, those powerful entities sworn to protect the balance between worlds, had intervened. They had confronted Ultranacious directly, engaging him in a battle that had shaken the very foundations of Nythoria. The fight had been titanic, a clash of cosmic forces that had lit up the skies and rent the earth. But in the end, the Guardians had emerged victorious. Ultranacious, weakened and wounded, had been forced to retreat, fleeing back to the safety of his dark fortress in Atherin. But the victory had come at a terrible cost. Though Ultranacious had been defeated, the damage he had wrought upon Nythoria was too great. The darkness he had seeded continued to spread, consuming the realm from within. Faced with this grim reality, the Guardians had been forced to make a terrible choice. To prevent the spread of the corruption, to ensure that Ultranacious evil did not spill out into the other realms, they had sealed Nythoria off completely, isolating it from the rest of existence. It was a decision that had undoubtedly saved countless lives across the realms. But for the people of Nythoria, it was a sentence of unimaginable suffering. They had been left to face the darkness alone, cut off from all hope of aid or escape. As Rose absorbed this tragic history, she felt a weight settle in her heart. The fall of Nythoria was a stark reminder of the stakes she faced, of the terrible price of failure. If Ultranacious was not stopped, if he was not contained, then Nythoria's fate could befall any realm. Even Earth, that distant world Silas had spoken of with such hope, would not be safe. But the accounts also gave Rose a flicker of hope. The Guardians had beaten Ultranacious once. They had proven that he was not invincible, that his darkness could be pushed back. If she could find the key to Atherin, if she could seal the realm as the Guardians had sealed Nythoria, then perhaps she could finish what they had started. Perhaps she could put an end to Ultranacious evil, once and for all. It was a daunting prospect, a task that seemed almost impossible. But Rose had never been one to back down from a challenge. She would find the key, she would seal Atherin, and she would ensure that no other realm suffered Nythoria's fate. Rose had been scouring Atherin's ancient libraries and forgotten archives for weeks, searching for any scrap of information about the key to Atherin and the ritual to seal the realm. She had followed countless dead ends, deciphered dozens of cryptic texts, but still the full picture eluded her. It was in a dusty, long-abandoned scriptorium that she finally found the lead she had been seeking. Hidden among crumbling scrolls and faded manuscripts was a single tome, its cover embossed with a symbol she had never seen before. A stylized tree, its branches reaching up to cradle a shimmering star. Intrigued, Rose carefully opened the tome, its pages crackling with age. The language was ancient, the script nearly faded. But as she began to decipher the words, her heart began to race. The tome spoke of Alfheim, the realm of eternal light. It described it as a place of powerful magic, where the very fabric of reality was woven with threads of arcane energy. But more importantly, it spoke of Alfheim's connection to the other realms, and the role it played in maintaining the balance between them. According to the tome, Alfheim was not just a realm, but a nexus, a central point from which all other realms could be accessed, and more crucially, controlled. The elves who inhabited Alfheim were not just guardians of their own land, but guardians of the very pathways between worlds. And it was here, the tome suggested, that the key to sealing a realm could be found. For to seal a realm was not just to close its borders, but to sever its connection to the nexus, to cut it off from the web of magic that sustained all of existence. As Rose read on, a plan began to form in her mind. If she could get to Alfheim, if she could find the place where these pathways converged, she could use the key to Atherin to seal the realm, to trap Ultranacious Eternus within his own dark domain. But getting to Alfheim would not be easy. The tome warned that the elves guarded their secrets jealously, and that they did not take kindly to outsiders meddling in the affairs of the Nexus. Rose would need to be cautious, to find a way into Alfheim undetected. She began to prepare, gathering what resources she could without drawing the attention of Ultranacious forces. She traded secrets for supplies, called in old favors from her time in Concordia. She studied maps of the realms, seeking the hidden pathways that might lead her to Alfheim's borders. All the while she continued to research the ritual itself, committing every detail to memory. She knew she would only have one chance at this, one opportunity to seal Atherin and end Ultranacious's reign of terror. As she made her final preparations, Rose couldn't shake the feeling that everything in her life had been leading to this moment. Her years in the Order of the Grey, her battles in Eldamire, her struggles in Concordia, they had all been preparing her for this ultimate test.